All right, it's showtime. I was waiting for the band. Good timing, Lloyd. Welcome to your show. Why wells fail? How are you, brother?
You know what? I'm all good today. Thank you, Steve.
Awesome. Today's topic is going to be interesting. You know, we've been talking about birthing wells in a healthy way. So today's topic is the 5 geologic clues to make or break a well. I'll key the band to settle down and we'll hop into this. First of all, Lloyd, why is this so important? Why are these 5 clues? In a good story, there's tension. Unless there's something at risk, the stories are dull. And there's a lot at risk when birthing these wells. So why are these 5 geologic clues important?
Well, the most important thing to understand about this is there's multiple mechanisms that the geology will tell us about that are going to potentially inhibit the rock's ability to give up the natural resource and or to give it up over a longer period of time. So there's ways that the reactions that's happening in the geology can block the pore throats that are going into the wellbore that keep that oil and gas from being mobile. And so these clues, these indicators, help us understand what we need to do to provide the greatest amount of preservation of the geology while enabling it to produce oil and gas. So, it's that dynamic equilibrium that we're looking for. And these are the key drivers of what we're looking at and the clues that help us understand how we help our customers produce more oil and gas over a longer period of time with less disruption.
All right. So if there's 5, let's start with number 1.
Well, number 1 is, and this is going to sound silly, it's knowing what type of hydrocarbon you're going to get. And folks that haven't been exposed to the type of total organic carbons, we call that TOC. When we're looking at that, is the geology, for no better term, is it baked, well baked? Is it slightly baked? And what that means is how long has it been under temperature and pressure to drive this organic matter into hydrocarbon, oil, and or natural gas. The more baked, the longer that it's been there, we call it the more mature, trends to more natural gas. It's going to be less liquid rich, and the less mature geology is going to have more liquid content. So we want to know the ratio over the well bore lateral to understand what kind of things can help us produce more and or will inhibit us from producing more. And sometimes you might just have a bunch of coal down there, and you're not going to get, if it's coal and coal-like, it's going to be a lot of gas. It's going to usually have lower BTU. When you turn on your gas at your house on your stove and you get that blue flame, typically it's supposed to be 1,000 BTU gas. As you get richer, it gets more higher BTUs per million cubic feet of gas. And so we're looking at those kind of things until you get to gasoline, natural gasoline, and then the larger hydrocarbons. And then when you get really big ones, like there's a lot of geology that has asphaltenes. You go, what's an asphaltene? Well, it's what you drive on in the highway. That's a residual, very, very long hydrocarbon that is part of the refining process. And a lot of folks don't know that we have to import a lot of our crude oil to generate the asphaltenes for our highways, because this new shale oil doesn't typically have a lot of asphaltenes in it. Now there is some that does, but it has a lot of paraffin. And so when you ask what is paraffin, if you've used Vaseline, you've used paraffin. If you burned a candle, you're using paraffin, generally generated from oil, not beeswax. So those are the things that the first one that we really want to understand, because really small natural gas is much more forgiving than very heavy liquid rich hydrocarbon.
Okay. So then number two.
Number two is going to be, is the geology swellable? We're putting this fluid into the well, and there's swellable clays. So it's just like you've seen a pond. It's all cracked up and you get water in it, it swells and then it holds water.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's usually from the expansion of the clays. And when they expand, they swell and they hold water. When they dry out, they shrink. Well, when they swell down whole, that's not a good thing, because basically what they're doing is the geology is imbibing water and it's blocking the ability for the geology to give up bigger hydrocarbons. So water is 3 moles, right? It's hydrogen, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. Natural gas might have a carbon tied onto it, being H2CO3, and then from there on up in the size. But understanding the size tied to, do we have swellable clays, and how do we address that? And so that's another indicator. The third indicator is tied to, do you have migratable clays and fines that are generated from the introduction of our frac fluid? And so the fines that get generated can be made out of iron and other metals predominantly that we're looking at. And we want to understand how much is this migration going to create places. If you think of it, they start building up and they end up creating a barrier for our hydrocarbon mobility. So we're looking at that. The next one is what kind of ability does the geology have to make acid gases? And that comes from, can be dolomite and other carbonates. And we want to understand that, as well as hydrogen sulfide, which comes from pyrite. And if for our folks, pyrite, if you've ever seen a chunk of fool's gold, well, that's what pyrite is. It's fool's gold, and it's iron complexed with sulfur, and that's what gives it that shiny look-alike gold in an atmospheric sample. But when you put it under pressure, temperature, and in a oxygenated fluid, it will break down and release hydrogen sulfide gas, or the kind of gas when you have a hot water heater that hadn't run for a long time, you turn it on and it's skunky. Mm-hmm. That's H2S from bacteria. So those are the key driving 5 indicators that we're looking at, and how much of it is in the geology to help us understand and predict the way that we prevent the failure of the geology, and create a dynamic equilibrium so it'll give up oil and gas.
So you got those 5, well, the 4 main things that we're dealing with in a whole, other than the type, the number 1, the type of what we want to extract. So that means that you got 4 things that have all these different variables that you need to address with what you're sending down there. And each one is unique. They're not all one size fits all. So you've got a lot. If you figure this one out, but you don't know if it's going to impact the other one. So like the clays, you said you got a swelling clay and then you got migrating clays.
That's correct.
So you you would address swelling clays one way, but does it impact in a negative way the migrating clays?
Doesn't necessarily, it's not a negative impact, but it doesn't address the problem because we call it, is it swellable or erodible? There's two different, and the most complex geology generally is both swellable and erodible. And when you have that, what we found is it usually has the best liquid hydrocarbon. So it's fragile. It's hard to complete. There's a formation that's called the Wolfcamp D. Folks also call it the Klein, and it has swellable clays, migratable clays, along with being in a usually very liquid rich environment with paraffins and some asphaltenes. And so you're really having to make sure that you're addressing the multiple mechanisms of failure that can happen when you complete a well.
So you take this environment, you stir it up, you got this storm going on now, we got all these moving parts, and this impacts the overall production of the well. This is a big deal on the investment that goes into this. There's a lot of there's a lot of money to be made or a lot of money to be wasted.
Absolutely.
And so you guys have a specific process instead of just guessing or let's pour something down here and wait a couple of days, see what happens. Tell us about that process.
Well, it begins with gaining access to samples of the geology and understanding those 5 variables. And there's a lot more. Those are the key 5 that most folks in the industry understand. And we have our own other variables that we're really looking at to help us make a very educated decision on our recommendations. But that's how the process begins. And if some companies don't have access to it, they don't have the ability to get samples while they're drilling the well. So we go back to our database and we look at all of the thousands of wells that we've completed in that part of the world, and or that we have access through our years of testing with other partners, and we can make a really good recommendation based on that. It's not the most preferable, but the most preferable is to get the drill cuttings and look at what we have along that long lateral, and that gives us the greatest level of confidence that we're providing a recommendation that's going to give them the best performance.
So this is a different process than normal, or that's been the legacy process. Let's just say that. So yeah, progressive-minded, I'll call them operators or producers, right? I
don't know that the word progressive. I think it's really folks that are looking at continuous improvement.
Yeah.
Mindset, and more life learners is the way that I think about that. So that's how I would frame it.
So you would go, all right, I'm going to introduce a new way or a business-like process where we're doing an evaluation, a systematic approach to this, rather than just this is what's worked in the past in this type of geology. And I would imagine this is appealing to these lifelong learners that you're referring to. Correct or wrong?
No, you're correct. And it's funny. Some folks are like, man, that's part of the missing piece. I never did understand that. And again, we're in a place of teaching because this is the thing that AI is doing is taking the collective wisdom and knowledge, right? And it's giving it to us at our fingertips. That's what our goal, what we're working with when we work with our customers and clients, we're understanding and we're sharing information that helps us continue to make a best decision. We haven't got it all figured out, but we've really made a significant leap from the current protocols that are not predictive. They're responsive after the fact rather than providing a predictive prescriptive solution. So that's where we are.
Me not being in the industry, I'm assuming that most of the folks that you work with, that when you describe those 5 geological things that are going to be in play and need to be addressed, is that common knowledge? I mean, do most people know?
It's common knowledge. But then how do you take that and apply that? What is the process that you take this knowledge? And ultimately, it's the why you do what you do, right, Steve? Many times our why is because that's what we've always done. It's what we're comfortable with. Our why is what can we learn today and apply in a systematic manner and then measure the results. And that's the place we are today, is that we have the ability to predict and then measure. Do we get it right 100% of the time? Absolutely not. But we're moving into, a low 90 percentile of being able to see it. And that's the other thing. You're looking at a wellbore. And so you're taking this rock sample, you're only seeing 8 or 9 inches of what's coming in that wellbore. Well, when we frack it, we're going out 400, 500, 600 feet of contact. And so we rely on some of the fundamental laws of horizontal deposition that's part of geology to say, hey, if it's here and we understand the lay of the geology, then we're going to be able to provide a solution that meets those challenges.
So you need a little.
Could you try again?
Sorry, Siri jumped in on our call.
She's wanting to help. Look at her; she's all eager. So what I'm wondering is, to make to make to garner the insights, you need a little time to go by to be able to reveal these insights so that you can address what you're working with. How much extra time does this take?
Well, really, if it's part of the protocol and we're grabbing the samples as the well's being drilled, our process takes about a week to get the information we need from the samples. And once we've done that and taken it through our laboratory process and protocol, we now have our predictive model, and we're able to go in and work the science with the model in place, and then make the prescriptive recommendation on what we recommend to get the hydrocarbon out most effectively.
What I'm wondering in my head is, like some of the jobs that I used to do, you need to prep the surface, then treat the surface. Is there just a similar process where you first go in with a preparation type treatment and then follow with other?
Yeah, the preparation is understanding what you're doing prior to going down hole. There's a lot of surface in your term preparation. It's understanding our water source. It's understanding other mechanical and chemical interferences that can happen with the geology long before you ever jump in and start the process of fracking a well. So there is part of what we do is the preparation, the understanding, but there's a lot of process involved in getting ready to help kick it off. And our portion of what it is it's a small portion, but can have a very large impact.
If I'm the operator, do I get like the plan? All right, here's the report. This is what we're dealing with. Here's how we're going to address it. And here's the next steps. Is that part of the process?
Absolutely.
Is that, again, my not being out there, right? I've watched Billy Bob Thornton. That's the extent of my experience out there on the being roughnecking and all of that. But when does that conversation happen? Where are you when you're looking at that data when making the plan together?
Well, we're working with the engineering team
Mm-hmm.
that's going to complete the well. A lot of times we're working with the companies that are providing source water. Some companies use teams that are called mud loggers, and they're taking those drill cuttings from the drilling mud and logging what the geology looks like. Those are companies that would perform really well with, because they're doing the work and gaining access to those samples. So we have a profile that we can look at, and it it ties back to there's just a complete massive team of people for each and every well, starting with the drillers, and again, then you go to the crews that come out and frack these wells and the ancillary services. It's holistically to look at it and watch it. It is something really pretty spectacular to see how well our industry has adapted to hydraulic fracking and then continuing to improve that process over time. It's the chase for energy is a big deal.
So it seems like you have these different teams that need to coordinate together, and then you're coming in and helping plan or taking information from these different teams to make the plan. It seems like it's a lot of coordination.
Well, it is a lot of coordination. And one of the biggest things is for all of us, I don't know anybody that doesn't want each and every well to be as highly successful as it can be, right?
Right.
That drives capital efficiency and longevity for our industry. But understanding these, the impact of not planning and understanding the things that can give us a negative consequence in a well, that's our job. That is the why. Our why is to help our customers produce at the lowest possible cost for the longest amount of time with the least amount of disruption. And that's the why. But it takes a team to bring together all the components to deliver that why. We're just part of the team that helps do that.
How do you coordinate buy-in from all those different teams?
Not all of them necessarily have things that they need to do that are going to impact it.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, the drilling division, if the completion group's asking to get mud logs off, to know why, it's to understand your rock so we can become more predictable and providing very bespoke, prescriptive applications for these wells. And so that's the part of it, is helping everybody communicate effectively the why behind the additional work that we're going to do, and what the processes we need to have going forward.
So the mud logs is what's coming out. The water resource is what's going to go back in.
Yeah, the mud loggers, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but a drilling rig, when it goes in there, right, you're chewing up this rock. They have a fluid called drilling mud that circulates in the hole, and it brings the material back to the surface, and it's dumped in a pit. Well, as it's coming in, there's guys that catch samples of the drilling mud. They sift out the drill cuttings, dump the mud back in the pit, and then they measure at what depth that unique sample that they've caught came from, and they build a profile of that wellbore along the lateral. And so, it's a somewhat of a thankless job, and it's a lot of work.
So I've seen those round pieces that have been obviously drilled out, but they're like chunks, but they're laid in a row,
Yeah,
right?
well, that's
And
a core. Now, what you're talking about there, that's a core, and that's a whole different matter. So they go in and they use a specialized tool to cut core, and it's extraordinarily expensive to core an area for a well. And some companies do what are called micro cores or plugs along the well bore to understand what they're doing. We've found that by utilizing something that's coming, it's a resource coming out of the well every time we drill it, by having some a discipline of getting those samples, we're able to go then measure those five components that we talked about, and then become much more helpful in our helping our customers get the most out of those wells.
so the water you mentioned earlier, something about you're coordinating with the water folks now. That you call it source water or produced water.
It's what is going to be the source water to frack the well. Is it going to be fresh water? Is it going to be, there's some deeper zones. Santa Rosa is one of them that is a brackish water in the Permian Basin. So it's got salts, it's got other materials in it. Or is it going to be recycled, produced water that has been repurposed to refrac with? Or is it a blend? So it's understanding what that's going to look like, so we can take it to the next level of providing that prescriptive program.
So these five things, you've been wrestling with these five things for years and years and years.
Mhm.
And now that you've got a patented process, let's talk about some indicators of success that you have on all this knowledge that you've collected. Now you're using AI to reveal insights as well.
Well, one of the big, really early indicators that we've done, that our process has worked well, is that you don't see any of the sand that has been placed in the well be returned. And when I say any, it's a very small amount. It's drumfuls, not large containers of sand that are being hauled off location. You spend a lot of money to put it down there. You want it to stay in. And so that's one indicator that says we've done. The second one is there's no emulsions. And an emulsion is a mixture of oil, water, and sometimes sand and other materials. And it's a stabilized fluid where you have to use chemistry and other treatments to get it to break out, to separate it. So it can be disposed of, either the water to the water disposal, selling the crude oil. But those emulsions are indicators that we've not created dynamic equilibrium downhole. And then we start looking at what is the transition. We know what the water looked like was going downhole. Are there changes, significant measurable changes as it comes back out over time? What kind of transition do we see there? Because that is another indicator. Did we stabilize, suppress, and really create dynamic equilibrium, or are we in a state of disruption? And we can tell that within the first week to 2 weeks of the well flowing back.
So the migrating clays, they're more creating dams or barriers, or is it coming back in some form in the water?
It's usually in as an emulsion. If you've got migrating clays, they create an emulsion at the surface. They also are part of the reason that you see the sand get returned, because you've got this pressure bringing this material in, and it's when it's an emulsion, it takes and moves that sand near wellbore and puts it in the wellbore, and it has to be moved out. And so that's an expensive thing to have to go back in if the well sands in, the wellbore sands in, and or you see it at the surface. It's not good. And many times that's caused by migrating fines, although it can be caused by other mechanisms as well.
Well, I wonder what question I'm not asking that you wished I would ask.
Steve, you've done a really good job of helping gain clarity. At the moment, I can't really think of one that I wish. I
Yeah.
think we've been able to really talk about this subject in depth.
Well, it seems to me there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be applied down hole, but then there's a team coordination and there's education as well going on. So you're not just, we're not just, doing like, we're not the old snake oil salespeople anymore, man. We're business people showing up. We gotta coordinate teams. We got to educate the leadership. Then we got to perform and birth a well that's very profitable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Lloyd, another good conversation on why wells fail, the top 5. Yeah, the 5 geologic clues that make or break a well. So what did I learn? It's like, what do we want to come out of the hole? What are we going to do? What are we selling? Then what's our, so what's the geology?
Mm-hmm.
Then what's our water that's going in? What's our clays? And what's what are
the materials in the hole that will react with it all when we go in and frack a well? So it's those are the clues that the geology lets us know, so we can design a system and a solution to bring success.
So we show up with a plan that creates clarity, and we're going to make some money from this well. All right, Lloyd, I guess we'll do this again next week. You open to that?
Absolutely.
All right. Good job. You guys check in, like, subscribe, do what all the cool kids are supposed to do. We'll see you next week on Why Wells Fail. And that's a wrap.